This episode of the Wedding Film School Show is brought to you by MusicBed, the best music licensing platform for wedding filmmakers. Head over to themusicbed.com and enter our code WFS on checkout to get a free month on your annual wedding subscription. Now, on to the show.
You mentioned the word trust. That is huge. Let's talk photography and let's talk videography. Like, this is number one when we start budget analysis. Those are the two things that you get to take with you once the event has finished.
You know, you have probably a little bit more money for the photographer. I've heard that that's changing.
I would rather make adjustments in other areas of the budget, whether that's flowers, whether that's entertainment. If that affords you the right cinematographer and the right photographer, let's prioritize this. For those who have never planned a wedding, like Godspeed, the venue, whether it's, a photographer, a videographer, how many shooters are you getting? How many hours of coverage are you getting? What are the edits you get? These are not questions that couples are necessarily positioned to ask off the rip. Everybody cares about, like, in the moment, how do you feel? I want to look at an image and feel that energy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wedding Film School Show. My name is Jared. I'm here again with my co-host, business partner, and friend, Jason McCutcheon. Jay's in the house. What's up, man?
How was your weekend?
This weekend it was rainy, and
so rainy.
I didn't do much. I hung out with my kid.
Yes.
Played video games. This is my last weekend before, I don't even know. I think every single Saturday I have a wedding from here on out.
Until you die.
Until I die, pretty much. In October is when I'm going to die.
Yeah. Well, I luckily get a couple weeks off because I'm having a new human in June.
A new model.
But, it should be a good season. But so today we have another wedding planner guest. And what's funny is, like, I love having wedding planners on the show. Even I remember before we were doing Wedding Film School, Jared and I had a show called Wedding Pros, and we were much more like initially wanting to do like an industry podcast with filmmaking creative kind of emphasis because that's who we are. But we always wanted to have planners on and all this because, like, we're fascinated about what they do. They're pivotal to our business, and really, like, it's really interesting, like, a wedding planner is really pivotal to, like, the actual film you make, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. It's fun learning about other parts of the industry. I think it makes you a better teammate to photographers, planners, whoever, just learning about other parts of the industry. If you're just, on videographer forums, and if you're just kind of hanging out in your own space, you kind of limit yourself, right?
Yeah, you want to do the best you can, but it needs to be within the context of what they're doing,
right? And
not just like,
yes.
If you have commercial filmmaking skills and you go and you can't apply that in every environment. You need to know what their goals are. Yep. So this is a planner who, one of my favorite planners and someone I really care about and love what they do. This is Kristyn Kerkorian from Kerkorian Events. How you doing, Kristyn?
Hi, guys. Thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And Kristyn, we've known you for feels like forever at this point. Tell us a little bit about your background for some of our audience. How did you get started in events? What was your evolution into starting Kerkorian?
Sure. All right. So I live and breathe for hospitality. I knew very early on this is a field I wanted to get into. I went to school at Boston University and graduated far too long ago that I care to admit from the school.
2010 she
graduated.
Yeah.
Exactly right. From hospitality and started.
That's a degree?
It was a degree.
Wow.
It was a degree. It was a very small school within BU at the time. I think there was only like 350 students. Now it's grown, and I mean, gosh, there's like thousands. So it's become a hot
Is that where you get all
commodity.
your employees from now?
You could say interns, for sure.
Yeah.
But I took that, and I started on the hotel side. Career start at the Ritz-Carlton. Well, it was the former Ritz-Carlton. It's now the O, Palm Beach. And from there, a few other properties. One of my favorites was the Colonnade Hotel in Back Bay, Boston. I was catering manager there for about 4 years. Tremendous experience, learning a lot of the back of the house operations, banquet event orders, understanding packages, what's included, what's not, all that good stuff. was introduced to you fine gentlemen. And then most recently was at the Boston Red Sox, handling special events for them, as well as at Fenway Park. And that was a tremendous experience, very unique property, obviously a ton of different events. And then in 2017, I finally had the courage to launch Kerkorian Weddings and Events. And it is by far the best decision I ever made. And grateful to have continued our partnership just in a different capacity.
Yeah. We were certainly excited when you started your own business. We were like, finally, you know.
Thank you.
Because, you know, we had worked with you at Fenway, you know. had
Did we
worked
work
with you
at the Colonnade with the? I don't think we've ever.
I don't think so.
Do they do events
I
anymore?
don't. I think that I don't know if it. No.
I don't think I've ever shot a wedding at the Colonnade.
One of the coolest places in the world, though, is shooting a wedding at Fenway, and they don't
That
do a
was
lot,
cool.
right?
No.
But when we did, it was like
It's fun. I think we
Classic,
did one
yeah.
like 2 years ago.
yeah.
But
We've done a handful.
it seems pretty infrequent anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, we were very excited and obviously have worked with you plenty, which is why I think we thought it would be great to have you on.
Thank you.
Is to really talk about relationship with planners and videographers and photographers and just help our audience kind of understand, you know, what a planner is looking for, kind of pick your brain a little bit on just, you know, best practices, not only on the wedding day itself. I think we put a lot of emphasis on the wedding day itself, like, hey, you stay in your lane, whatever, conversations we might have, but also what does it look like leading up to the day too, and kind of having that relationship. So, yeah, very excited to have you on because I think you're one of the best. You're obviously been doing it for a while now. So, but we want to talk a little bit about just general like trust, right, between photographer, videographer, and wedding planners. So. Let's talk a little bit about kind of your process.
Sure.
You know, maybe start us off at the very beginning, help us understand just when you get a new client, what kind of your priorities are.
Yeah.
Leading into the beginning stages of the process.
Sure. So initial inquiry comes in, and I'm a firm believer of having a conversation, a very candid conversation with the couple right up front. We talk about a whole slew of things, their vision, their hope for a wedding, their expectations of me as a planner, and then I share a little bit about my process and what I do, and we figure out whether or not it's the right fit. From there, once a contract has been signed, and we understand that we're going to be moving forward, we've solidified the venue, the date, and so forth. Part of my job is to assemble the vendor team. I should just back up and say, you mentioned the word trust. That is huge. So I think that the trust begins initially with my interaction with the client and letting them know not only my qualifications as an event planner, they've certainly seen my work, whether it's on Instagram, my website, whatever it may be, that there's already an established amount of trust there where they will defer to me. Most of the couples that I work with defer to me on my expertise and the resources that I have. You both happen to be one of our preferred cinematography companies. I mean, one of my first calls is always to you. I think it's fair to say that you virtually have very little interaction with the client during our initial call. It's not until later into the process that we have an open dialogue, all of us together.
Yep.
So one of the services that we offer is budget development, and it's really important from the get-go, I think, to have an initial understanding of what the total investment for anyone's wedding is going to be. And part of what I do is I dig a little bit deeper into the elements that are important to the couple, and I help allocate those funds in areas that are going to be most impactful for them as a couple. What is most important to them? Two of the things that are most important to me that I always suggest, and something that we always approach first, is photography and videography. Cannot stress this enough. Like, this is number one when we start budget analysis is let's talk photography and let's talk videography, because essentially those are the two, this is the story that is being told. Those are the two things that you get to take with you once the event has finished. Of course, you're going to remember the energy of the band. You're going to remember your meal. But these are the images that you get to keep for a lifetime. You can always go back to your video and watch it, even if it's a recap. So that's something I'm pretty clear about contracting and sharing up front to get that ball in motion.
Yeah. I always think about, because I've heard that from a few planners and just around the industry. I feel like that's becoming the way it's sold. But it is interesting, like statistically speaking, like I think it's like 5 to 7% of someone's budget is anyone who gets video. It's about 5 to 7% of the total budget. Maybe 10% of the budget and the top end would be photography, and then obviously that goes down the bigger the budget gets. Like, you're not going to have well, I guess if you're Jose Villa, you might make $60K on a wedding, but in general, But it's interesting to me how much, like, if you're in this industry, how few people actually understand how much everything else costs except for themselves.
But that's part of my job.
Yes.
Is couples come to us, and I have to say this, and I'm not trying to plug planners here, but for those who have never planned a wedding, like, Godspeed, because there are so much about planning a thoughtful and meaningful celebration that they don't know. I mean, you get rifled off package after package after package, and trying to dissect those across the board, whether it's the venue, whether it's, a photographer, a videographer, how many shooters are you getting? How many hours of coverage are you getting? What are the edits you get? Is there drone coverage? These are not questions that couples are necessarily positioned to ask off the rip. They don't know. This is where we guide them. And I'll share with them, like, if we're out in a gorgeous, tented celebration, the one that we had in Sherborne last year, we talked about that. One of the things right immediately, because there were multiple tents on property and we wanted that overhead coverage. The property was super special to the family. We added drone coverage. They didn't even know, like, that would have been an option to have had added. So, again, we go back to the trust element, both, client side as well as vendor relations. We're working together to create these meaningful films that the couples will love.
But even the process of, like, managing the budget, it's not this infinite budget.
No.
Like flowers are a great example. If you bring up flowers, like, to a luxury filmmaker, like, they're like, oh, big flowers means I'll get paid, right? But if you bring up flowers to, like, a person, they're like, oh, they can't even give me $5K, but they can spend $20K on flowers. And they don't understand, like, that the planner can't just make flowers cost whatever they want them to cost.
So what's interesting about this, there's two things immediately that stand out to me whenever I'm working with a photographer or cinematographer. The two main qualities to look for is number one, that you're behind the scenes. You're not right there with a camera in their face. And the other thing is that you could take pretty much any design, any wedding, and make it look spectacular based on the angles and cuts that you are capturing. So when I'm working with a couple, and that's no slight on the budgets and the investment, because I'm fortunate to work with couples who do have healthier budgets and appetites with what they want decor and design-wise. And it does not fall lost on me. I'm very grateful to be able to design in that capacity. I know that's not the story with every couple. However, it's important, and we've gone through this, Jason, like, when we're shooting a room together or details, you and I, a lot of times we're working together and I'll be like, did you get this angle? Did you get this cut? Because I know the couple works specifically, like, we got those escort cards. There's hand calligraphy that's super important to them. That was a special way of setting whatever it may be. That we work together.
That was their grandmother's
exactly.
font.
Yeah, things that you would never know unless you had the communication. Yeah.
But I think it's really important to also know I am willing, and I can't speak on behalf of all planners, but I am certainly one of them, and I'll put myself out there and say this. I would rather make adjustments in other areas of the budget, whether that's flowers, whether that's entertainment. Maybe you don't have, like, the live, quartet for ceremony. Maybe we reduce it to a trio. Maybe we do a duo. Maybe we have a solo keyboardist, whatever it may be. If that affords you the right cinematographer and the right photographer, I always advise, let's make adjustments elsewhere. Let's prioritize this.
Yeah. So I think videographers have always kind of had a little bit of, like, a Napoleon complex when it comes to, like, photographer budget versus videographer budget. Traditionally, I've always felt like, you have probably a little bit more money for the photographer and a little less money for the videographer.
Yeah.
I've heard that that's changing. Like, maybe there's, like, a lump sum and, you split it maybe 50-50, or you change it depending on the couple's needs, right? That what the couple is expressing as important to them. Do you feel like things are changing in that way? Yeah.
I do. And what I admire in particular about what you've done with your company is you've made it attainable for all, right? So you have Stop Go Love, which is, we do probably 70% of our business with Stop Go Love. But you also have this niche, this luxury market niche that is Huxley Film. You know, pricing starts anywhere between $10K and up, depending on the number of days of coverage, et cetera. So some of our clients want that. They want a more comprehensive story. They want the details the night before. I'm inclined to say that absolutely. I think that cinematography pricing is matching photography, maybe ever so slightly, you know, just under, but by far, I think that it's important to have both.
Do you find couples, like when they, I think, well, my first question.
Yeah.
Do you find most couples seem to understand photography, right? Basically.
They do and they don't.
What don't they understand about photography?
They don't always understand. So, and this is interesting because I've taken the time. I love photography. I mean, clearly you guys have seen me on on wedding day. I love to offer like a little bit of guidance. Respectfully, I do. But I think that they don't understand. There's so many different, like the lens type that you're having, the edit, the coloration of your gallery, the number of pictures in your gallery, the edit time, the number of shooters, the number of hours of coverage. Those are all things I look for. I also look for the diversity and the candid images in every gallery now. Gone are the days of these like posy pose moments. Even gone are the days, and we talked about this earlier about, the getting ready moments. Like, nobody really cares about that anymore. Everybody cares about like in the moment, how did you feel? I want to look at an image and feel that energy. Couples don't always know that. They don't know to ask for a full gallery, so that they could take a look at somebody's work. What you see on Instagram, what you see on their website is their best work. Dig a little deeper. And
it could be T-ball with a good planner.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
But in general, they're coming in there saying, hey, okay, we want wedding photography. Question part 2 is, do you find most couples are asking for wedding filmmaking, or do they need to be pitched wedding filmmaking?
A little bit of both. There is this sort of, I know that you offer photography as well through Stop Go Love, but those who are sole photographers, I've been asked often, do they offer videography as well? I say no. I mean, most often it's somebody who is a sole photographer and somebody who also focuses on videography, separate parties.
Yep.
It's a rarity that you have a company that encompasses both, which you both do, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. For us, though, it's very lopsided. It's like filmmaking, like we both are filmmakers at heart. I just love photography. So it's like, if I can squeeze in a few, to scratch that itch.
Sure.
And like really give couples my full attention. And I'm only doing like 5 to 8
sure.
a year, maybe.
It's a convenience for couples. But in general,
I'm prompting it.
Yeah.
It's something I'm prompting.
Yeah, people
9
don't.
out of 10 times I'm prompting it.
Yep.
I will have couples say to me, do we need a videographer?
Mm-hmm.
And do they even know what it is? Like, because I do think like most people, they have Instagram, right? They know how to interact with the idea of a photo, right? They're like, I want photos. I take photos. I understand photos, and I want them. I'm not sure. Like I think in the industry right now, it could be going up, but as of like 2 years ago, it was like 60% of couples got a filmmaker, and 98% booked a photographer. So it's like at every single wedding, you're gonna have a photographer, and then you'll have. And I think our industry is always like, come on, how do we build this demand up?
You also have a lot more short-term bookings. I think that people are what used to happen, certainly not what I'm practicing now, but is we would slate videography if budget allowed toward the end. That has changed. That has changed at least with the way I operate. That it's videography and photography are the two elements that we tackle first, and then we dive into the other components. So, but it used to be that way for sure.
How far out are people typically booking you? Like, are you starting to have these kind of conversations? Is it like a year out, 2 years out? Like, what's your average?
So it's funny, post-COVID, the trajectory of planning has changed entirely. And I actually am glad that we're chatting about this. There's this this change now where I would say 1.5 years out, 2 years out. It used to be you'd get, hired a year out and you would get to work. I mean, I've had some engagements that are 4 months out and we've had full scale productions, which have been phenomenally beautiful weddings. But on average, I would say a year to a year and a half, sometimes earlier. But there's almost this innate sense that couples have that they're already behind a 1.5 years out.
Yep.
And my heart breaks for them because it really robs them of the opportunity of enjoying an actual engagement.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, planning is not a checklist. It shouldn't be a checklist. It should be a process that's thoughtful and detailed and meaningful and feels like it's the right choice for the couple. So I do my best. Yeah, sure. While there's, some sort of urgency to assemble a vendor team just based on demand and what our industry has experienced over the past 2.5 years, I really want them to feel like there are options and there's time.
Yeah.
They always have time. That's something I love about our relationship as well is, most often once we've secured the date, we sit idle, the three of us, in terms of our communication around their wedding for at least, 6 to 8 months or however. And then 4 months out from their wedding, we start our, our questions. Thank you for not always making me fill out your worksheets. My production schedule answers those for you.
Yeah.
But that took time too. I mean,
Yes.
there was a level of trust there.
Yep. And
And also
having the
just
right conversations.
communication. It's
Yeah.
like it's not automatic.
Yeah.
People need to figure each other out.
Well, and the reason why I ask you about that is just to establish, look, people are booking us a year out.
Sure.
On average, probably at this point. Maybe
Yeah,
even
yeah.
probably
I
a
would
year
say
on average.
slightly less than a year.
We have some people that, of course, are booking us crazy in advance. The people that are scared and are like, I feel like I'm behind. And
Yes.
It's 2 years away, dude. You have plenty of time.
Yes.
But on average, it's about 1 year. You probably have more of a relationship with these people because you've just started much sooner than we have. You've probably had a lot more consultations. Typically, we're having maybe one consultation, a few emails back and forth. We're sending out, you're sending us your a PDF before the wedding.
Sure.
We're having a final consultation. We don't have the interaction that you have with this couple. So it's like you are really like
You're the creative
broker between us and the couple. We trust you to have the couple's needs in mind just because we have that kind of relationship, that back and forth. I think a lot of videographers would be horrified to know, we most of the time, like you said, don't have a conversation with the couple. I'm talking to you before the wedding day, and I'm asking a little bit about hey, how do they like to interact with each other? Are they shy?
Or even would they like to speak to me?
Right.
Like if you're no, they don't care. They don't want.
And sometimes they do. And here's
Yeah.
the thing is, what I think other cinematographers need to understand about sort of the beauty of this relationship is, first and foremost, there's no ego on my side. I'm not one of those planners that I don't want to create a wall between you and the client. I certainly want you to have some rapport, or whether or not it's a few weeks leading up or whether or not it's that day and you've had some time beforehand before we get underway with full production to have a conversation, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes. But what cinematographers don't understand is when a planner is brought on board, it is primarily because the couple doesn't have the time. They don't have the time. They don't have the ability to go through all the contracts, all the worksheets. I mean, if they filled out every worksheet that we are getting, so these are the conversations, the time-consuming conversations we offload for them. So I'm sharing with the both of you pertinent information that you need to know, whether it's family dynamics, whether it's a unique design element, whether it's a really cool invitation suite, whatever it may be. If we have any surprise moments that you're going to capture, I would say maybe every so often we do have a couple that's hey, I'd love to touch base directly as we're getting closer, and that, I welcome that. Sure. In fact, I don't even hop on those calls anymore. I used to be part of every single, but again, we go back to the trust.
Yep.
I know they're in great hands with you. I know you're going to ask them questions about just them. You're not going to dive into the logistics that overwhelm them. You're going to come to me for that information.
Yep. I feel like anytime I'm having a conversation with the couple about logistics, when I'm not working with a planner, it's really just to set them at ease. Mm-hmm. I don't need it. It's written down on a piece of paper. I'll be at the place at 1:00 or whatever. I'll look through your schedule and be like, I have a question about this part. It seems like we're not going to have enough time to set up or whatever. but it's really just to set them at ease. With you, I'm already at ease. I know the schedule is going to be great. If I have questions, I ask you, I bring it to you. But then when I'm talking to the couple, I'm just talking like creative, who's important, like what's your relationship with your mom like,
Totally.
How can we capitalize on these elements, which is great. It allows us to not waste time.
So I was going to ask you, like, because I think it'd be nice for people to kind of hear a little, behind the scenes of like a working relationship, because I think a lot of people, there's like the luxury, top of the top, 1%,
Sure.
everybody's like wanting these $1 million weddings. And I've had a little interactions with those events. That is a whole other level.
Sure.
It's a different experience, including for the planner.
Yep.
For everyone.
Sure.
I'm not sure everybody wants that. Definitely not everyone can have that. It's like there's so few people even getting married at that level. I do believe like what we're doing, I think, it's in the top 1% of weddings, but it's not inaccessible. People can make films and work in a market that we work. And so myself, and I don't know about you, you're probably going to ascend past us soon.
No.
So, but like, I think it is interesting for people to know like what it's like to actually work. So I think we should talk specifically, and maybe we talk a little bit about that BTS we did on our channel. So if you're listening, you can go watch this. Kristyn was the planner on a wedding we did
in February.
February 2023.
Yep.
And so we did this BTS video, and like that's a really good example, Jared, of like a typical Kristyn Kerkorian experience on our end, in terms of like, this is what I'll describe it. I think I've said this to you a couple of times, but very detailed timelines, right? She gives us like even like room layouts with graphical like top-down displays of what to
Which
look.
is great, by the way.
I
we
love
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we can plan our lighting, we can plan our camera angles. It's awesome.
Kristyn has like, we did not speak to that couple, I don't believe, really. It was like, hey, I need you at this event,
Nope.
blah, blah, blah. And it was at the Newport, which used to be the Newberry, which used to be the Ritz-Carlton. They redid that hotel. And it was kind of just like everything that like make really beautiful reception, epic florals, kind of like, even like the type of couple was, I would say, like the type of couple you typically work with. So I think it's a good one to talk about. So why don't we talk a little bit about kind of that schedule and that day? Like, what were some of the things that they wanted out of that day that maybe were unique to them?
Absolutely. Okay. So interesting piece of this as well, and I should share this, is I had the privilege of not only planning their wedding, but I'm also planning the groom's sister's wedding that is upcoming this October that you both are shooting as well. And they're actually going through Huxley for that film.
They're a fun family.
So this family is dynamite, right? Like I met them, there was an instant rapport. It started with the father of the bride, then the mother, mother of the bride.
That guy is really funny.
And we just all became fast friends, which is really, and I have to say this, that's what makes me beat, right? Like that's what makes me tick. I look for those relationships, and then that trust, it just naturally and organically strengthens and develops. We brought you on board, which was phenomenal. You did not have contact with the client. We chatted pretty much. We talked through the schedule. I knew that there were elements. I had talked many times with a couple about areas that were most important. For them, it was just having a big, big party. Ironically, that wedding was slated to happen at the Four Seasons Hotel that underwent a major lobby renovation. We had to move the wedding from the Four Seasons to the Newberry. And when we did that, it's the first time the Newberry has ever had this blueprint, which I thought was so cool, as we took over the entirety of the floor. And we had dinner in the assembly ballroom.
That's the first time they've done that. They should
first
do that
time ever,
every time.
right?
Yeah,
So
great.
such a cool layout.
Yep.
So we flipped. We had the garden room for their ceremony. They went out into the assembly foyer, greeted by all servers that lined that long aisleway with champagne and drinks, with a nice warm welcome into the assembly foyer. They had cocktails there. While they were enjoying cocktails, we flipped. We had a team over at the garden room flipping that into the after party space with the dance floor, band, et cetera, et cetera. And then they had dinner in the assembly. So the format was different. They pushed 231 or 32 guests for that wedding. So we knew that the format was something we definitely wanted to capitalize on. We had a trio lead them from dinner into the dancing area, which was a moment we definitely talked to you about capturing that as well. The suites that they had while they were getting ready, again, we touched on that. We didn't really dive too deep, which again, I go back to sort of passé. Like nobody cares about like those actual, the flat lay sure, the invitation sure. But the dress, I'd rather see it on the bride than on a hanger, right?
Same.
And so
even though we get the dress every time.
Even though we get the dress, I mean, we'll get
I feel
it,
the same exact way.
But I'd rather see it live and in real time happening on the person. Anything staged just is not, it's not my style.
Yeah.
It's not my couple style.
Yep.
And we align on that before we even get started. So, but the first look, was that location optimal? It worked for what it was. We had some last minute changes.
Well, the real question is, did the couple were they distressed?
No, they loved it.
That's the question.
It spoke to them. It spoke to them. It's what they wanted. They had a true, authentic downtown Boston wedding. The element of privacy, which was not filmed, was really they had a private exchange of vows before we had the ceremony.
Yeah, because that was a big thing. Like on the BTS in the YouTube comments, people are like, "Oh, that was the wrong location. Why did you do that? Why did you do that?" And I remember thinking, like, if you're asking me, you don't get these weddings. Like,
there's always a story behind it.
Yeah.
There's always a reason. We're very thoughtful about where we pick those areas. That couple chose to have a private exchange of vows that they elected not to have photographed or videoed, which I respect emphatically.
well, yeah. So this is what I was gonna say. Jared and I knew this. Like we didn't even really speak about it. We were just like, okay, we knew that they wanted to do private vows.
Yep.
It's also Boston. If someone wants to do a first look in Boston, they know people are going to be there, usually. Like, even if you go to the Garden, there's going to be people walking around. So there's really, when you're shooting a wedding in Boston, you're generally not trying to find a private place. If they want to be outside.
And I think that's part of the magic of having a downtown Boston wedding is, when we went over to the Garden for some of their formal photos, people are cheering, clapping. It's exciting. It's exciting for the couple.
Taking a shit in the back of the photo.
But it's just like, that is what it is. But the other thing is like, what are they going to value? If I created this private, intimate moment for them, they told me without telling me, we're not actually that comfortable with that. We're when I'm going to be revealing myself to my spouse, intimately, and my emotions, they literally didn't want us to cover that, explicitly didn't want coverage of their vows. I know someone who's doing something like that isn't wanting me to create this magical private moment for them. They're wanting it to have, even in their vows, they started out with rock, paper, scissors. I didn't know they were going to do that, but we read the room.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying is, when we got that edit, right? When we had your edit and we saw it, it spoke to the couple. You had a very... I hate to say public first look. I mean, it was a public first look, but it was
a public first.
An awesomely charged first look, right? That was complemented by the clips that you got, which was the authentic moments in their ceremony of them playing rock, paper, scissors. That's their thing.
You don't want to take a couple and try to jam their schedule into your film. You want your film to work around their personality, and ideally, and this isn't always the case, but I would say most of the planners we work, and definitely you, because you trust us, we trust you. We know, hey, if she's saying, hey, we're gonna go outside, we're just gonna do it right out the door. I'm assuming, okay, they must not find that this to be super important, so I don't have to think about it. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to shoot what's there. And we're going to put our emphasis on the other things, the other parts of the day. And I think that's really interesting is how many filmmakers don't work to get that kind of trust. They don't know how to read the schedule correctly. They don't Jared, how many times have I said this schedule's a problem?
Oh,
not mine.
No.
Well, no, even on yours sometimes.
Whoa.
Yeah, even on yours sometimes, but not for me. It's a problem if I want to do whatever I want to do. It's not a problem to the couple.
Yeah.
I'll say I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. I don't bring it up to you. I don't ask you to change it. I just do something different.
And you make it happen.
I just make it happen.
But here's the thing is I'm also the type of planner that's receptive to that type of feedback, right? Like I'm a firm believer, do not clip the wings of a creative.
Yep.
If you have something that you think is going to add value, bring that to my attention. And if we can make it happen, we'll make it happen.
But it doesn't necessarily add value. It's my preconceived idea. It's not necessarily valuable. I actually find a lot of value in thinking differently.
Yeah.
So sometimes when you look at someone's schedule and you're like, all right, so they're telling me something. They're telling me what's important to them. What can I do that's important to them? Remember that couple, the Wano Club, a couple years ago? I knew they didn't want to be portrayed in certain ways.
Sure.
It wasn't overly important to them to have a bunch of portrait work, let alone stage portrait work.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like they didn't like we're shooting and they're like, okay, we're all set. Like they're done. It's not important to them.
But we took those cues. Like we took those cues really well.
That's my point.
And here's what makes a phenomenal, videographer is you're not manipulating the narrative to get the story.
Yep.
You're just telling the story with what you're given. And there's a big difference between the two. I had a wedding last September. I'll never forget this. It was not your company. The couple insisted on having this company that was based out of California. And I did not feel good about it. I red flagged it. I told them I don't think this is a good idea.
You called me about it.
I called you about it. We went forward with this company. We got back the clips. It was underwhelming to say the least.
Well, I'll call the company out because we're calling them out all the time. On our channel.
No, don't call the company out. Don't call the company out. But let's talk about this though. Is the cameras, what I couldn't even, the father of the bride is trying to give a speech and they have set up their cameras literally 2 feet from this man's position on the center of the dance floor. So all you could see from this company totally robbed the photographers of a beautiful shot.
Well, that's a national chain though.
It was a national chain. So we got the film back. The edits were underwhelming. And what did we have to do? I sent you the raw footage, and thank God you guys pulled together this beautiful...
For all the filmmakers listening, the edit, which I don't blame the cinematographer for, because I'm not sure... They actually seem to... They didn't do the edit. Whoever shot it didn't edit.
Right.
So whoever did the edit actually just didn't include the A-cam in the entire film.
Yeah.
So they shot this on like 2 like B and C cams that were like kind of meh cameras, and then they brought an A7 IV, like a really nice camera. Not a single shot from the A7 IV was in there, and then the also thing is whoever was doing the editing doesn't know how to grade log footage.
Okay, so to piggyback off of this, which I think is important to note, as an event planner, as somebody who sees a lot of weddings, maybe not my own, because I study a lot, I look at a lot, I see a lot. What separates a good from a great videographer as well is in the initial 10 seconds of that film, am I captivated? Do I want to continue to watch the rest? I can't tell you how many films I watch that open with this like scenic image that's heavy. It goes heavy real quick into the ceremony with like vows and crying. And sure, there's sentiment and there's emotion, and it's important to capture that in some capacity. But let's also talk about the celebration piece of it, right? So maybe we start with the celebration. Your films, what they say to me is that was an incredible, unforgettable night. And you tell the story with happiness, with all the emotions. There's all the emotions. But I think it starts with those first 10 seconds.
Anyway, we did fix the film because the cinematographer they actually did a decent job. They weren't as bad as it seemed.
No, it wasn't horrible.
But
it just was underwhelming.
The total low touch of the company, the lack of attention to detail by the people making the film and all that junk. And it is what it is. I would say book those people at your own risk.
Yes.
Just to backtrack on kind of what you were saying before, Kristyn, I always think that people want to see themselves in their most idealized way.
Sure.
Right? Some people are going to want a film that seems super epic where they want us to capture them reading their vows, and they want it to be heavy.
Sure.
Maybe throughout the entire film. I don't feel like that's most people. I feel like most people are like, hey, we're going to throw a party. There's important things. Like naturally, a wedding day has these romantic moments built in. They're committing to each other for the rest of their lives. There's like an inherent, romance to that. that we want to get, but also we want to get the humor and we want to capture kind of whatever's happening. I like what you said, is not force our will upon the day, force a narrative on the day. That's our approach overall. And maybe sometimes we should get maybe a little bit more interactive. That was one of my takeaways from that behind the scenes, is like, you know, the groom has his mouth open. He's just like, yeah, talking the whole day. And I was like, maybe I should have like had him not do that. Maybe I should have had him like just be like, hey, you know, look at each other and don't talk for 2 seconds, and I'll get a couple more flattering shots to you. But generally, we're going to be
that
very
is within your
hands-off.
ethos, is like you want them to look their best.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
at the
definitely.
same time too, I think the big thing for me is just I don't want to ever disrupt the timeline.
Yes.
Because there's other vendors involved, like a band or a guy. Literally, it could be a coffee cart later in the night. Like the more every
No,
time I'm like causing
totally.
a buildup, it's like a traffic jam.
But
in the
that's
wedding.
why it's imperative that the level of trust you have with your event partners, right? Like, how many times have we been on site together where you're like, Kristyn, I need 5, I need an extra 5, or whatever it may be, and we make it happen. It's constant communication where we're working together to ensure the success. And what I love about you is you're like, we always have to be like a couple of steps ahead of you, which is true. Like, you always have to be, you know, even moving over to the church before we are, so you can get the ceremony lighting, all of that in place. Like, we work through that.
Yeah. And I would also say, like, we ask a lot of you probably, of like, hey, I was reading through the schedule. What do you think if Jason especially likes to do this. Like, what do you think if we grab them and do this very specific type of shot? Like, we bring them into the room, we have them to ourselves, and we get a couple shots. I would say that deserves a little bit of like build up and build of trust. Like, I don't think it should be something necessarily you're asking a new planner that you're working with right off the bat.
No.
Because you don't have that trust
You have to
yet.
believe that it's actually going to be 10 minutes if I tell you 10 minutes.
Exactly.
And that is something that, again, the level of trust, because I need them back in 10 minutes.
Yes.
But if I say, go have at it, take 10 minutes, like, great.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
What I was going to say was when you think about like someone's schedule, like it's really not about us or the photographer or anyone.
No.
It's not even just about the couple. Like like the guests are important too.
They sure are.
Like they're showing up and they're like, we're sitting here doing nothing, or the food's getting cold. There's so much like, I think the big thing, Kristyn, is like, do you see this a lot? Like a lot of people who try to get into the wedding industry, they know their discipline, or at least they try to know their discipline, whatever it is they do. They don't understand weddings.
They don't understand the pieces of the puzzle. There's a lot to consider. So as planners, and again, I'm not trying to plug myself, but we have to we're managing not only the schedule, we're managing, you know, anywhere between 12 to 15 vendors, their schedules, and then the couple, and then all of the guests. So we essentially, you know, coming in with a solid team, and I'm so grateful that I have such a rock star team, 2 of which, you know, out of the 5 that have been with me since day one, like we are in sync. So we know you're in the room, you're detailing, you're with the groom, you're with like, we all have our roles to make sure that those things are managed. The other thing I'm very cognizant of is you talk about this downtime, right, for guests. There's 2 periods that I find this to be the most critical. It's just before ceremony. So I'm a firm believer you start ceremony between 5 and 7 minutes after the published time. No later, no earlier. Any guests who are arriving later, we hold off and we can let them in once the couple has gotten down the aisle. The other piece is right after dinner, right? I call it the food coma, where people have eaten. They don't know whether or not dessert is being served or if they're supposed to get up and start dancing. The second I start to see the energy whittling in any shape, way, or form, we fire it up, whether that's toasts, whether or not that's formal dances, but we get the party started. That's so important.
Yeah.
That's for the guest experience. Especially.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think something that I've always tried to do when working with you and you know, other planners is like, I think we understand really well how many things are on your plate. Like, all we have to do is film the wedding. Like, and most of the time, people aren't bothering us. Like, we're just kind of in our own world. We're filming. I always want to be conscious of, like, Kristyn's doing a lot of things right now. She's talking to, like, 3 people in the back room. I'm not going to ask her a question about my lighting right now. I'll wait and see, like...
or if, like, you want the vegetarian meal. Like, can we talk about that later?
Exactly. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to just understand if you're not in this world, if you're shooting backyard weddings, if you're, you know, in the barn or whatever. literally you can do whatever you want.
You
take
absolutely
the
can.
Like take
Do
them to
it.
the sunset. There's not anything going on. People are just drinking Coors Light, watching the sun go over the cows, in the background. Like when you're working at downtown Boston wedding, there's so many more pieces to the puzzle, and I think that's really important as you kind of work your way up into these big ballroom, big 4-star, 5-star, hotels. That there's a lot more going on than you even probably know about. So,
yeah. Last question. How much do you just love it when creatives don't look at your timelines?
I mean, let's be honest here, Jason. I think for the first few months that you and I were together, like I'd send it to you and you'd be like, I'm not looking at a 25-page document. I have tightened it up a little bit. I have definitely tightened it up a little bit. And really now I'm bullet pointing what's really pertinent information that you need to know. But a lot of that is happening behind the scenes in conversations. But yes, what people don't understand is those production schedules take us like 8 or 9 hours to compile, and they are thoughtfully planned. It's not like I'm just putting together a timeline and saying, here we go, like, let's hope it works. It is meticulously planned based on what the couple wants and needs during the course of their day. So it's really helpful when vendors, even if you just brief it, I mean, now you come to me with questions, which I love. Because I'm like,
love
oh, you read it.
Because it's just like, I create my abbreviated version. I don't need to
And
know
that's
what time
fine.
tablecloths are
Yeah,
arriving. But
Exactly.
I think it'll inform the questions to ask.
Sure.
Like, it's like, oh, well, okay, this could be an issue. Hey, what about these two things?
I also list all the key players now. Like
Yeah.
on page 3, you have a list of all the key players, which is important.
Yeah, well, so hopefully if you were listening to this podcast, you enjoyed it. Kristyn, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
on. I always encourage, like, for if you're out there listening, you get a Kristyn, get your own Kristyn, not mine. But get planners who you trust, who you enjoy working with, who help you make good work. I think that's how I always look at it. Like, I would hope that you would view us and say, like, what we're doing for you is helping you grow and helping you promote your business and helping you
Sure
create a
does.
great experience for your couples. Yeah. And I feel the same way about what you do for us. And so I think that's what the opportunity is for filmmakers.
And it's also fun. Like the way that you work makes me want to do more weddings.
Thank you.
Doesn't make me want to
That's a
do
huge
less.
compliment.
It
Thank
makes
you.
me actually want, like, I feel invigorated, encouraged, energized by doing weddings with you.
Thank you.
And finding a good planner who's awesome at their job, and you don't have to figure out extra things. You make our job easier. We hope we make your job
You
easier.
certainly do.
And have fun along the way. Weddings are fun.
Yeah.
It's really the coolest job in the world.
Sure is.
It's literally a party. You go to parties for work.
That's what we do.
So it's fun. So thanks for coming on, and thank you so much. And where can people find you?
My website, Kerkorianevents.com, or on Instagram at Kerkorian Weddings and Events.
Nice.
I know it's a mouthful. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, so definitely check it out. And if you enjoyed that podcast, give us a little review. Check us out on YouTube at the Wedding Film School Show, or our main channel. We do education, gear, all that stuff. Wedding Film School, TikToks, Instagrams, all that stuff. So thank you guys so much for checking out our show, and we'll be back next week.